What should you do if you want to take ground out of CRP or out of pasture and put it to a crop? Well, today we'll talk about just that because over the last couple of years on our own farm, we've done that with CRP and with pasture.
First of all, I'll start with weed control. When you think about it, if you're coming out of something that's perennial, like we've got perennial grasses and other potentially broadleaves out there, how are you going to get those under control? When you think about our cropping systems, we do a good job stopping annual weeds, but perennials can be a little more difficult. Oftentimes we can use a Roundup treatment at a very high rate, up towards the high end of the labeled rate, and do a good job on these perennials that are out in pastures. We could also utilize something like extend crops, so we had dicamba in the mix, which can also move down into the root system of things like thistles.
Darren mentioned perennial weeds. The first thing I always think about with perennials taking ground out of CRP or pasture is you got to use Roundup. I know that Roundup doesn't kill a lot of weeds out there, but it still is really good on many perennials as opposed to Liberty or Gramoxone. I mean, there are a lot of contact killers that don't get that entire root system. So I think that's really important. The biggest thing that I look at when I think about CRP and pasture ground is, for many years, the organic matter in that soil has been building up. There have been a lot of great things in terms of soil health done, and ideally, I don't want to have to do full-scale tillage. I'd like to go out with strip till or no-till, something like that. I get it that maybe there's some gopher holes or, just things like that where you have to smooth the ground out a little bit, but try not to do major tillage, moldboard plowing, anything like that, because you just destroy so much of what you've built up for the last many years.
The other thing that may have built up over the years is certain herbicides that have carryover potential. I think about products like Tordon, for example, that while the weed killing power wears out over a year or two, the danger that it causes to crops like soybeans, for example, could persist in the soil for many more years, maybe 5 years or even more since the last Tordon application. Well, that could impact a soybean crop. So generally, I want to find out what has been used in that pasture or CRP over the last 10 years. And then if I see some things that scare me, I'm probably going to go with a grass crop like corn to try to avoid injury.
Yep, so on ground where we've had it been pasture in the past, take it out of pasture. We'll leave it in corn for 10 years most of the time because Darren, I think, is underselling Tordon and its residual. Very often we'll see Tordon carry over for 10 years. So you want to make sure that you have a grass crop, corn or wheat, for a really, really long time out of pasture or CRP if one of those long residual herbicides has been used. Other than that, I guess the big thing that I would say here is you can be successful with CRP or pasture ground. We've had it where first year out, we're 250 bushel corn. It can work, but you've got to look at what's your fertility. Do a good job of soil sampling, properly fertilize, invest the money, and think long-term, not just, oh, I gotta get by this year, get by cheap. Most of the time, we're only talking a few acres that you pull out. Invest the money heavily to build that soil up and make it good for the long term.
One final word of caution would be about insects. If you've got some ground that hasn't been tilled for many years, like pasture or CRP, and you're probably not going to do heavy tillage right now, like Brian was recommending, you've got a lot of insects out there. You may have a lot of grubs, you may have a lot of wireworms, depending on your area of the country.
Yeah, it's not going to be the rootworms or bean leaf beetles or anything like that, but it is those grubs and some of the tougher insects.
Well, and you see moths and that kind of thing like to use heavy grass like that as a good place to lay eggs. So do be on alert for bugs, and you're going into a new field here. Scout it regularly. You may say, I don't have time to get to every one of my fields every week. Make sure you're in this field every week or you will have some issues.
Yeah, because it can be super successful when you take CRP or pasture out and put it to a crop.
One thing you may have to watch out for is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?